Kel suddenly wakes up and she looks around and tries to figure out what just recently happened. But when she realized that she was just in a battle and that she was first believed she was killed, but after she realized she was still alive, she stood up and looked around for any of her platoon members, but everyone was gone. It was just they had just left. But they realized the enemy must be still around. But there were no enemies around either. There were no signs of either both the enemy or of her own troops. Then she came to realization to her that they supposed to believe she had been killed in the battle. And since this planet itself was a small, minor planet, it didn't have any particular value for both sides, not for the Covenant Empire. The Empire itself and the humans had no much any particular value of this planet though, because it was so parts as so much as remote from both sides of humanity and even for any usable for the Covenant Empire. And after that, Cal had woken up. She tried to remember exactly what happened, as she was looking around for any other survivors just in case if there were any. But as she was looking around, she couldn't find anyone. She was like the only one there. Only that was left was just ruins of their old former camp of the team. There was some damaged parts of ships that was left behind, some equipment that was still damaged and something like that. Even though when she believed maybe one of the ships might be in orbit. But how to reach out when her own communication was down and the equipment in the base that was completely destroyed? And there was no other way to communicate with that. But then she realized, what if this was one of the ships that they still had in camp or in at the base? So she looked around. But unfortunately, that all ships did find were damaged ships. Some that was not even could even fly anymore. One that still seemed to be perfect condition. The only problem was that it wasn't even had strong engines left. Only like maneuverable thrusters was only just worked. So without that, even though there was still part of the working ship, it couldn't even leave as far up in the air. And this only communication was also somehow damaged. So she realized she was stuck on this planet for this. Well, she was stuck on the planet, and no way to reach out to her own people, and no way off this planet. But she realized, at least that she realized she is safe for the moment. Since she still had a base where she can still been used salvage so anything that she can need. And she can use the still working ship as some shelter if there was going to be storm or anything. So after that, she immediately went around in the old camp looking for anything that she could still salvage, like weapons, ammo, or any sort of anything that she can maybe repair the ship with. So she managed to find at least several boxes which still were usable rations and even some ammo that would last her maybe for a couple of months if she rationed about them enough. But there were not much about it. There weren't much parts that she could been using though. She went often through the old ships that had been damaged. If there was any parts from the engines that she can salvage and bring back to the other ship that still very much intact. Unfortunately, there weren't much spare parts or many parts that can be used. Some of the parts have been damaged even beyond repair. Despite she wanted to be able to try to repair maybe either the ship itself or maybe the radio. But even come to realization to that. Even despite she managed to fix the radio itself may only be reached low orbit in on the planet, not even beyond that. The radio itself would not be even strong enough to even reach any other known close by outpost or any other planets in near distance. The nearby inhabitable planet was at least about dozens, maybe as 12 light years away from the planet she was on. So she realized it was pointless to be trying to reach out to any other survivors or any other people on the orbit. Even though that she realized the enemy itself, even though they would have picked up the radio signal, they wouldn't even have even bothered because of this planet wouldn't have any particular value. But herself would have been a very strong value to the enemy. If they managed to find her still alive, they would capture her, try to torture her to extract information that they can use against the humanity. So first order in her mission now was in survival. To build a better shelter, try to find any other reasonable rations that she could save and somehow to rations that she could manage to survive for at least. She made some calculations how long these rations would last. According to her, the supplies that she had found would last maybe adds up to 6 months. But if you ration it to only take half almost each of the food that she had, it could last maybe up to less, maybe as 10 to almost 12 months. Even though despite she had hoped to be found by anyone else during that particular time, but she couldn't even give up hope to be found. So she did everything that she could to do. So even during the time that for the next couple of months, she even started building some sort of like a protection barrier around this camp, like with sticks, poles in the ground, which is like its shape as a protection for against the local wildlife. But after a while, though, after a whole year had passed, still no signs of any rescue or anyone else, though. She was even unaware what's going on in the galaxy, if the war was even continue, or if the humanity had lost the war. She has no contact with the outside galaxy. But during the time of after a whole year, her own rations of the supplies had run out. And just when did when she come to realize that her own supplies had getting run out, and she couldn't even spend not only that in one time. So she started to hunting some of the local wildlife in the area, make some traps and even use some makeshift weapons and even some of her own ammo to hunt down some animals to be feeding herself. Luckily, there was a river nearby. She managed to catch at least some fish and even managed to capture small mammal-like animals like deer, rabbits. There were at least enough meat of her, some food to sustain her. But she did had after almost 2 years on the planet. She had even given hope that she would be found. So she told herself that she may have to realize she may never leaving the planet and that she may have to make this as her own home for the rest of her life. And even after that, she had been on the planet for just barely 3 years total. She had to come to realize she had just been got used to living on the planet, living as their own, as she had been living as her earlier ancestors back several thousands of years ago as hunters. She still had some of the gain, had read some about their techniques, how to hunt animals, or any prey that would she need. But then, after 8 years on the planet, when she was in her own ship, she heard a sound in the area. First, she maybe believed it was just some of the local animals that were used to making some strange sound. But as she listened closer to the sound, it was in fact a mechanical sound. A sound of a ship, or at least something. Cal had no idea that the ship had actually arrived at the planet, even though she had no idea how this may have been helping her, just been saving her, or maybe that the enemy has somehow returned to being, maybe has taken, had reclaimed the planet for themselves or something. She would not even want to be do much speculations, so she decided to go back and wait and see who can have returned. But as she saw, there was in fact not an enemy ship, there was an Earth ship. Somehow a small scout ship, or at least a freighter of some kind. She wasn't even certain because there was not something unfamiliar with this particular design though. But as she saw the ship was landing in the area, she may took one of her last weapons that she still had last ammo and went to the area to see how much, or at least who, had arrived. She didn't want to be arrive at the ship, even realize it may have been a human ship, but it might even be an enemy had been captured on human ship. So she would not take a hesitation, just hide, because she didn't want to take all kinds of precautions. Then she actually saw there was just at least one female on board, and she was in fact a human. After a while that, she realized in that the name almost immediately recognized the person. It was in fact one of our colleagues by the name Linda-0508, or at least just Linda for short. She had even seen Linda for over nearly 8 years. And Linda herself was not even aware if there was any survivors on this planet. She knows this planet used to be part of the Covenant Empire's war against the humanity at least a few years ago. And she now realized there were only a couple of survivors out on the planet, but there were no other survivors, and the humanity never came back to reclaim the planet or the Covenant Empire. But when she saw this camp, and she realized there may have been some survivors on the planet, but it may be long gone. But she wanted to be investigating just in case if there was any signs of survivors at all. But when she saw a figure in the distance, she saw it was a woman, a human being. She immediately recognized it was, in fact, Cal, one of her trained friends from the training. She walked up to Cal. She was surprised, but she was holding a weapon just in case if Linda or if Cal would have been trying to attack her. After that, she realized Cal had been on the planet for nearly a decade, for nearly 10 years alone. She may have gone completely insane, or may have been getting insane when it comes to complete insulation for so long. But when she approached, Cal started to cry and said, "Linda, is that really you?" Linda was surprised at seeing that at least Cal doesn't even seem to be confused or crazy, or if she was just seeing things. But Linda was not even taking that as a precaution. She asked if it was in fact the real Cal, because as the official records says, she has been dead for 8 years. But Cal explained that she is the real deal. She can prove it. And she put a small knife in her hand and made it and the bleeding red. So she realized that she is a human being and not some sort of shapeshifter alien or something. But Linda herself was now at least relieved the scene was in fact her old friend. They went back to Cal's camp, where Cal offered some of the food she had, even though when she asked Linda why she is here and what happens in the war. According to at least Linda, she explained the war had ended at least a couple of years ago, and she asked how, and Cal asked who won the war. And Linda explained the fact there was a treaty between the Covenant Empire, which no longer exists, and that they're now peace. Linda then asked how long has she been on here by herself, and what she realized was 8 years, but she realized then asked how long? And how has she been able to survive all this time without being found? But then Linda realized this planet was a minor, small planet in a remote area in the galaxy. And since a small battle took place on the planet and the humanity lost, and the humanity didn't even bother to return back there to reclaim it. So since this planet was so far remote from Earth humanity's territories and even Covenant and the Covenant Empire, and since both empires didn't seem to have any particular value on this small planet since it was so far remote from both sides. Linda then asked if Cal wanted to leave the planet and maybe go somewhere else to rejoin the society again. But even though Cal realized she had been gone for nearly a decade from her own kind, she had no idea if she would be able to get used to adapt to back to modern society again and something like that in civilization. But she realized maybe now since that she has been declared dead for at least a couple of years, it would have been strange if she returned back to Earth and the command may find out she's still alive. But even though when Cal asked Linda, she wasn't even wearing any of her supposed armor as were the soldiers. Well, Linda explained she had left the military, at least shortly after the war itself. She didn't want to be part of any more battles anymore. She had get tired of fighting in constant battles and in the battles of battles to battles. So she resigned from the military to live a more civilian life. So she managed to buy a small ship and traveling around the galaxy by herself, doing random jobs that she'd be able to support herself and make her keep going on her journeys. And she came across the records of this planet and may think there might have been some values or maybe something that was left behind from the war. Maybe some old relics that maybe that she can salvage, maybe parts from the ships that lay behind, maybe that she can take them back to sell them at the market, or then maybe bring them back to the military. But she was not expected to find a survivor after so long on this planet, and now she offered Cal to join her. Since Linda was not had no plans of going back to Earth for a very long time, she said, she had offered Cal to join her on her ship as part of the crew. They can both spend time where and go anywhere they wanted. They had now no orders to taken except give their own orders. After a few moments of thinking about it, Cal decided she wanted to do so. So she joined Linda on the ship and they all went around in the galaxy for the next 2 more years. Even though Linda herself was very interested to know more about Cal's time on the planet, so during the first couple of days after they left, though, she started telling her all about kind of things she had been going through. Like she had when her own food had run out of the supplies that she had managed to gather from the old base, she decided that the only way for her to survive was to live as their own kind of humanity's ancestors did, like during the Stone Age, hunting for food. And she had learned at least some skills to have been trained to have been trapping animals and tracking others. She actually put her own military training in a good use to track animals that she could hunt. In that way, she was able to learn how to survive all these years without any other people. But Lyndon even asked, how can she have been around the planet and not have gone crazy or really insane of isolation for so long? That was something that Cal had also realized she hadn't even thought much about it. But keeping her own self, well, she was having her own. She had maintained some of her old military practice, like exercise and even self-defense training, hunting. She kept herself occupied daily basis in the every day, in which talked to herself maybe, and even had kept her occupied each single day, had made her not even go crazy of isolation. And that was something that Linda was surprised of. But during the travels around the galaxy, they have been so much fun. They got to know mother, got to know each other more. They even actually went back to Linda's home planet, Verent, for a short visit. And even despite this, they never actually they never actually stayed there. They only went there for only a short time before leaving again. They even encountered other colonies around the galaxy for some human friendly aliens amongly together. But despite all of this, there was something about Linda that Cal hadn't even thought much about. But after though, when she came to realization, Cal was in fact a very kind, generous, and beautiful woman. And even though despite they were only maybe as a couple of years, they were the same age. After they had been traveling around for at least two, maybe that's a couple of at least amount of 4 years, they have been starting to be a couple. They actually was had been start dating, and even despite they travel around in the galaxy for their own missions, their own journey, for instance, say, they had got close, and they actually had started dating, and they loved each other. They had to come to realization that they had feelings for each other. And after that, they decided maybe it was time to maybe do something else in their lives. So they decided they went they wanted to settle down for once, to start a family, get married to each other. So they decided to go to a small outpost or at least a small colony that was at least far remote from any other suspicious eyes for the military, or at least what they thought. So they decided to find a small planet in both shoes, a particular random planet, where they settled down. They first got married, and yeah, it's just a great time. Even though, despite this, even the small planet had just mostly a farming community colony, but they had a great time. Cal, she actually became a teacher in the community, while Linda herself, she actually became, well, she usually part work as a part-time farmer at on their own place, but she even worked as a bartender in town. And even though they sometimes they leave the planet to go on some journeys on with the ship, which they still kept, but they always return back home to the planet. They just having such a great time. And after they had been married for about 2 years, they wanted to start a family. And they were at this local orphanage in town, and they decided to adopt at least maybe one or two children. They adopted three children for the fact, two daughters and one son. And they were in fact siblings. The daughters were twins, age 5, and the boy 6. And it was a lot of fun with them. They were listen. They listened all the stories the parents had when they were traveling around in the galaxy to experience new worlds. They encountered aliens on their travels and just having such great time. But even despite all of this, Linda, she was very excited to be meeting with her old friend those years ago, and even to be with Cal. Even though Cal herself, she realized she realized that if she had even seen Linda had arrived to the small planet she was on for all those years, she may still have been on the planet alone and never been meeting her future wife and having a future children with her. She was just excited and happy that Linda did in fact arrive to the planet. Even Linda herself was really happy that she had made this decision to go to this planet and maybe search for any things that she could sell to the military or to any particular market that she could need for. But was she not expected to find a survivor after a long lost battle, but in fact not only found an old friend, but also found her soulmate. Even after all this time, Cal and Linda, they lived together on the small colony that they decided to make as their home with their children. Even though despite their having military training in the background, they like to be as simple civilians. Even it took Cal at least a while to get used to living as a civilian, but now she lives with Linda and their three children. It was the best moment from both. And this is how Cal 11441 and Linda 058 found true love and got a big family together. The end.